Just 1,000 kilometers away from human habitation lies Antarctica, the southern end of our planet, a continent of wonders and a glimpse of the past.
History. The history of Antarctica emerges from early Western theories of a vast continent known as Tetra Australis, believed to exist in the far south of the globe. The term Antarctic, referring to opposite of the Arctic Circle, was coined by Marinus of Tyne in the 2nd century AD. European explorers first approached Antarctica in 1520 when a Portuguese navigator and explorer, Ferdinand Magellan, rounded South America during his journey to circumnavigate the world. In the 18th century, the British naval officer James Cook and other explorers explored the sub-Antarctic region. Antarctica is governed by parties of the Antarctic Treaty System. 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty in 1959 and 38 have signed it since then. The treaty prohibits military activities, mineral mining, nuclear explosion, and nuclear waste disposal. It supports scientific research and protects the continent's ecology. Unlike most places that were discovered by other civilizations but had endemic people already living there for thousands of years previously, Antarctica has never been a native human population. The idea of Antarctica was first mooted by ancient Greek philosophers. They knew about the Arctic that they called Arctos, the bear, after the constellation of the Great Bear, from sailing voyages records, descriptions, and stories. They had proven that the world was a sphere and so postulated that there should be something at the pole opposite to the Arctic to balance the world out. They called this undiscovered landmass Antarctos. The first sighting of Antarctica is now widely acknowledged to have taken place in the 28th, maybe the 27th of January 1820 during the voyage of two Russian ships, the Vostok and Mirny, under the command of Captain Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen during the 2-year exploratory expedition around the world to discover new lands for the Russian Empire. Bellingshausen's ships were the first to have crossed the Antarctic Circle since Cook nearly 50 years earlier. They did so on the 26th of January 1820.
Geography of Antarctica. More than 100 million years ago, Antarctica was part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Gondwana gradually broke apart over time, and Antarctica, as we know today, was formed around 25 million years ago. Antarctica was not always cold, dry, and covered in ice sheets. In fact, at a number of points in its history, it was further north, experienced a tropical or temperate climate, and was covered in forests. The Antarctic Ice Sheet. Most of Antarctica is covered by the Antarctic Ice Sheet, the world's largest ice sheet and also its largest reservoir of fresh water. Volcanoes. As of today, there have been more than 100 possible volcanoes identified in Antarctica. Mount Erebus is one of the most notable sites in the study of Antarctic volcanism. Deception Island is another active Antarctic volcano. Finally, we have the canyons. There are 3 vast canyons that run for hundreds of kilometers. However, none of the canyons are visible at the snow-covered surface of the continent since they're buried under hundreds of meters of ice.
Flora and fauna of Antarctica. Flora of Antarctica. The Antarctic flora is a distinct community of vascular plants which evolved millions of years ago on the supercontinent of Gondwana. It is now found on several separate areas of the southern hemisphere, including southern South America, southernmost Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and New Caledonia. Plant life can occur on almost any exposed or ice-free rock, in lakes, and in the near coastal snow and ice. Fauna of Antarctica. The most abundant and best-known animals from the southern continent, penguins, whales, seals, albatrosses, other seabirds, and a range of invertebrates may not have heard of, such as krill, which form the basis of the Antarctic food web. Penguins. emperor penguins, king penguins, Adelie penguins, instrap penguins, Gento penguins. Seals. Weddell seals, southern fur seals, southern elephant seals, crab-eater seal, leopard seals. Other animals: krill, wandering albatross, snow petrel, Antarctic skua, blue-eyed shag, giant petrel, Cape pigeon, snowy seathbill, Arctic tern.
Climatic conditions. The climate of Antarctica is the coldest on Earth. Most of Antarctica has an ice-capped climate with very cold and dry weather. The warming of the Antarctic Peninsula is causing changes to the physical and living environment of Antarctica. Melting of perennial snow and ice covers has resulted in increased colonization by plants. Because of global warming over the past 50 years, the west coast of the Antarctic Peninsula has been one of the most rapidly warming parts of the planet. This warming is not only restricted to the land, but can also be noted in the Southern Ocean. Upper ocean temperatures to the west of the Antarctic Peninsula have increased over 1 degree Celsius since 1955. It has now been established that the Antarctic circumpolar current is warming more rapidly than the global ocean as a whole. Emperor penguins have also experienced a decline in numbers by up to 50%.
Life in Antarctica. It is a home to a lot of evidences that can give us a glimpse of the past, and at the same time, Antarctica helps us foresee the future. Who lives in Antarctica? For months, one of the few places in the world without a single reported case of the coronavirus was the expansive, remote continent of Antarctica. That changed on December 21st when a Chilean research base reported 36 cases of COVID-19. Antarctica is one of the rare places on Earth that does not have an indigenous population, so every person that lives in or visits Antarctica is to do research. The expeditioners who live in these stations conduct research in atmospheric studies, biology, glaciology, medicine, human impact and environment. Other people include doctors, cook, drivers, plumbers, electricians, mechanics and carpenters. They keep the stations running and support the scientific research. While the continent itself is remote, scientists are rarely alone. They live, sleep, eat and work together on small research bases. Clothing. The type and amount of clothing needed to stay warm and dry depends on the time of year, location and what sort of activity you are doing. Buildings on the station are heated to around 18 degrees Celsius, so normal clothes can be worn. Food. Stations also have hydroponics in hothouse conditions to grow a few fresh vegetables like lettuce and tomatoes. People who live in towns get served by cooks, while those who live in remote places has to cook food on their own. A lot of food which is served is actually expired and recycled food. Water. In earlier days, snow and ice was moved into large tanks and heated to melt into water. But now people draw water from local tarn, which is possessed by reverse osmosis system. Education. Up to 2009, there were 11 children born in Antarctica. There are 2 very small schools in Antarctica. The parents of these children work at the same bases. Entertainment. People hike or ski to outlying places, sometimes to stay the night in field huts. People go on skiing, jogging, cycling or walking closer to station. Midwinter's Day is traditionally celebrated with a sub-zero swim through a hot cut in the sea ice. Difficulties. Hypothermia is the lowering of body temperature below the normal. It is the most dangerous risk when expeditioners are in the field. This is why it is so important to keep warm and dry. Taking the correct clothes and equipment is essential. Harsh weather conditions mean limited food and supply deliveries. If they run out of food, they have boats and nets which can be used to catch fish. Majority of scientists in South Pole are exposed to 5 times the recommended limit of UV rays, so wearing goggles and sunscreen on the exposed skin is also very important.
Antarctica is probably one of the most untouched and unusual places in the world, which is why it is a dream of every adventure seeker to visit the eccentric place at least once. But what does it really have to offer the tourist? There are tons of things that Antarctica has to offer for visitors. First, we have the wildlife. Antarctica is the only permanent landing for the emperor penguin. Besides, there are many species of whales found in the Antarctic waters, including the humpback whale and the blue whale. Consequently, this becomes one of the best places to visit for a wildlife enthusiast. Next, we have the active volcanoes, sheer cliffs, and iceberg carving. Deception Island in Antarctica is an active volcano, an astonishing place with an estimated 100,000 chinstrap penguins. Massive sheer cliffs with jagged peaks drop straight into the sea. The Lemaire Channel has the Antarctic Peninsula on one side and Booth Island on the other. This is a top tourist destination in Antarctica, and because of its beauty, it has been nicknamed Coral Gap. You will also find many icebergs that carve off the glaciers and produce beautiful shades of blue. Besides this, there are over 70 Antarctica specially protected areas, Antarctica specially managed areas, and 85 historic sites and monuments. Finally, we have the scientific experiment. Science is really significant in Antarctica because unlike most other areas of the world, it remains relatively untouched and all activities are carefully controlled and ministered. Scientists go to Antarctica to study various aspects of science that Antarctica has to offer. The near pristine environment with far less human activity and contamination than anywhere else on Earth makes it ideal to study all manner phenomena.
How Antarctica affects us. For a little over 100 years, people have been traveling to Antarctica. In that short time, most parts have been visited and we have left more than just footprints. Human impacts include harvesting some Antarctic species to the verge of extinction for economic benefit, killing and disrupting other species, contaminating the soils, discharging sewage into the seas, leaving rubbish, cairns and tracks, changing attitudes. Scale of environmental impacts in Antarctica. Environmental impacts in Antarctica occur at a range of scales. Global warming, ozone depletion, and global contamination have planet-wide impacts. These affect Antarctica at the largest scale. Fishing and hunting have more localized impacts, but still have the potential to cause region-wide effects. Impacts of hunting and fishing. Hunting for whales and seals drew people to the Antarctic in the early years of the 19th century. Within only a few decades, these activities caused major crashes in the wildlife population. Fishing. Fishing is the only large-scale commercial resource currently harvested in the Antarctic Treaty Area. Major fisheries worldwide have faced overexploitation. Undoing past damage. Environmental management aims to ameliorate past environmental impacts and reduce current and future impacts. The Australian Antarctic Program is developing procedures for the cleanup and remediation of abandoned work sites and disused tip sites. In the early days, waste management included using open tips and pushing waste onto the sea ice. Commitment to the Madrid Protocols confers the obligations to clean up abandoned work sites and waste tips so long as the process of cleanup does not cause greater adverse impacts or cause the removal of historic sites or monuments. Australian scientists are developing new cleanup and remediation procedures that will not cause greater impacts.
The polar regions of our planet may seem beyond the reach for most of us, but the fact remains that they're not beyond our influence. Antarctica, a continent of wonders, a glimpse of the past, and now a sight into the future.